Hello, Florida. Hello, Georgia. And hello, America. This is Joe Mullins with the Joe Mullins Show, Live, Work, Shop, Play. We're going to talk today why America and the southern region of America is the greatest place to live, work, shop, and play. And certainly, my guest today is one of those reasons. We have got one of our national figures, our great congressman, Congressman Buddy Carter. Congressman Carter, welcome to the show today.
Well, thank you, Joe. It's a pleasure to be with you. And I couldn't agree with you more. The Southeast United States, Georgia is my home. It's where I've lived all my life, where I intend to live the rest of my life. And I'm so proud of it and so blessed to live on, especially on Georgia's coast, where I get the honor and privilege of representing.
Well, Congressman Carter, you have a lot of similarities to Florida. You know, me being a Georgia native, I'm from Augusta, Georgia, but I live in Florida now. I serve the government elected official in Florida, and but you never leave your roots of where you come from, especially when you own a lot of rental properties. But we we have a lot in common with the coastal needs. The states really mimic each other. The rural areas, they've got coastal areas. You've got our big cities. They're so similar in needs. Tell us a little bit about what you do in Congress to help states like Florida and Georgia.
Well, let's face it, people are gravitating toward our area. We have a lot of retirees in our area, a lot of veterans, and there's a reason for that. First of all, we got a strong military presence in Georgia and in Florida, and a lot of the military, a lot of the veterans, after they retire, they want to stay here, and they like the quality of life. They like the fact that the weather and all the amenities that come along with this. We have the great state of Georgia that has the coast of Georgia, along with the mountains, along with the flatlands, and everything to offer here. And really, when you have the head of the state like Atlanta, which is such a magnet for so many conventions, for so many great events, everything that has been going on. Of course, we had the 1996 Olympics here. We're going to have the World Cup here and everything, the Masters, a yearly event in your hometown of Augusta. All those things just make for the quality of life is just such enormous here.
Now, Congressman Carter, your seat, you're running in addition to being a great congressman and fighting up there for many years for America and the true conservatives, you're also running for a Senate seat that Herschel Walker ran for a few years ago that we saw loss, and it pivotably changed the direction of the country. One seat affected Florida.
Absolutely, it did, and I couldn't agree with you more. It's this is such an important election. You know, we've got 2 Democratic senators in our state, and our state is not Democratic. And we're not ruby red anymore, but we're still a red state. Almost all of our statewide elected officials are Republican, and the state of Georgia, along with Florida, of course, voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump for president in 2024. And they deserve someone in the United States Senate who's going to support President Trump and his America First policies. And President Trump deserves someone from the state of Georgia who's going to support him as well. I've been doing that in the House. I'll continue to do that in the Senate.
Now, Congressman Carter, you know, let's talk a little bit about the House. You guys have had some really big votes and big things coming up. The SAVE Act, just a number of other, the big, beautiful bill, so many big things. How have we been able to get this much done compared to his first term when the House and the Senate were all fighting and broken apart?
Well, you're absolutely right, Joe, and that is an astute observation. I would submit to you that the first year of this president's second term has been the most productive of any modern day president. If you look at what he has achieved, securing our border, making our country safer, he's also improved our economy. We passed the Working Families Tax Cut Act, the one big beautiful bill, that no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, increased child care tax credit, prohibited the largest tax increase in the history of our country. Most Georgians, the average Georgian, saved over $5,000 in taxes as a result. In fact, I want to remind the listeners that just last week in the Ways and Means Committee, the tax committee, if you will, of Congress and in the House, We had the IRS testify before that committee, and they said that the average refund from the IRS this year has been up 10.2%. What this president is doing is putting more money in people's pockets, and that's important to our economy.
Now, Congressman Carter, Senator Rick Scott was on the show not too long ago, and he was talking about the importance of getting strong patriots in the Senate all over the country. He warned Floridians, listen, most of the Floridians come from different states. You still can vote in different states. This is so crucial that we support and fight in all areas, not just Florida, not just our counties, not just our regions, but all areas of the country. What is your comments on something like that? And how does it affect Florida and other states across the country when we lose seats like we lost in Georgia several years ago?
Well, and you mentioned it just a little while ago, and I think it's true. What happened in Georgia changed the trajectory of this country. If you look back to 2020, whenever we had the 2 Democratic senators elected, and that changed the trajectory of this country whenever the Biden-Harris administration went in. If we had had control of the Senate, and we only missed it by 1 seat, if we had had control, we could have stopped some of the awful things, the egregious things that administration caused during that time period. And that would have helped us. And that's why every race is important. I couldn't agree with Senator Scott more. Every race is important, but particularly those that we're supposed to win. We've got to win those. No excuse whatsoever why Georgia should have 2 Democratic senators representing us. No excuse. We've got to change that. Jon Ossoff does not represent the values of the state of Georgia. He doesn't represent your values. He doesn't represent mine. I mean, this is someone who voted against the Working Families Tax Cut Act. He wanted your taxes to go up. This is someone who has voted against funding for DHS that we're suffering through right now, where our Coast Guard, who are fighting for us in Iran, they're not getting paid right now. TSA's not getting paid. FEMA's not getting paid. And of course, ICE is not getting paid. Why are they voting against it? Because it's nothing more than an extension of defund the police. They don't want ICE to be funded. And look at what happened last fall when Jon Ossoff voted 14 times to keep the government closed and to keep it shut down. 14 times he used our troops, he used our WIC, our SNAP beneficiaries as leverage to try to achieve what? To try to achieve getting health care benefits for illegal immigrants. That's despicable. That's not what Georgians want. That's not the way we should be represented in the United States Senate. That's why we got to have a change.
You talk about Ossoff and the stuff that they've done in Democratic cities. Florida recently saw Miami lose for the first time in decades a mayor position to a Democrat, and people underestimated. They didn't get out and vote. They just assumed it was a guaranteed thing, kind of like Georgia did in the Senate race. It was shocking to see the amount of Georgians that didn't show up to vote, that just assumed it was an easy race and a win. Traditionally, in runoffs, Democrats don't show up to vote, but this has changed. It's now showing that they're coming out, or somehow their presence is a lot bigger than we've ever seen before. The importance of talking to people for this midterm election and voting and getting out there. How many years is a Senate position for?
It's for 6 years. It's for 6 years. And the House is 2, but the Senate is 6. And that's why we've had to endure 6 years of Jon Ossoff and his Democratic parties, of him supporting Chuck Schumer and the Biden-Harris administration. Remember, the 4 years that the Biden-Harris administration was in office, Jon Ossoff and Chuck Schumer were supporting open borders where millions of illegal immigrants came across our border, including criminal illegal immigrants, including the murderer of Laken Riley, one of our nursing students at the University of Georgia, who's studying to help people and to help people in the future. And yet she was killed by an illegal immigrant that came across that border. And this is an example of why we thank President Trump for having to secure our border. But this is an example of why ICE is going after the criminal illegal immigrants to try to get them out of our country now, because President Trump promised he'd make our country safer. And this is the way he's going to make it safer.
Congressman Carter, you talked about the stuff that Ossoff has done. You've talked about those things. I've continually heard you in Congress and you through many years talk about how important the economy is. The economy being one of the most important things. People are suffering in our country. People are hurting. I'm here in Atlanta right now at Atlantic Station, and I was walking around last night. This is a Democratic city. It's run by Democratic mayors. They do not support their police. The police here continually, once we get engaged and start talking and realize I'm in Florida, ask me about working in Florida. How can they get transferred down there? Do I know anyone I can introduce them to? This is typical of what occurs in Democratic cities. But I'm walking around Atlantic Station, beautiful place. Publix is closed. Shoes place is closed. Retail's closed. All this stuff is closing up in these cities. When I talk to people, they say number one is public safety. They're concerned about the safety that the city does or pushes or how well they support their law enforcement. Number two is economy stuff. The city's more focused on giving money to different areas of supporting things, different movements, different trans. They're giving money to illegals, but they're not paying attention. These senators and these local officials in these Democratic areas aren't paying attention to the general people that have lived here, grown up here, lived, worked, shopped, and played all their life here. What is your comments on that and some of these impacts that we're seeing in cities all across the country?
Well, one of the things that we need to note is that, as I said earlier, President Trump promised a number of things during his campaign in 2024. But the two main things that he promised is he was going to make our country safer and he was going to make it more prosperous. He made it safer by securing the border. He also made it safer. If you look at Washington, D.C., where he called in the federal troops, and thank God he did, because it's like night and day what has happened there. It's so much safer now. And where he has sent those troops in, and they've made a significant difference. Our cities are safer. People aren't afraid to walk down the sidewalk now. They aren't afraid to go out at night, and that means so much more to these cities. And it's really a shame. And the Democrats will holler, "Oh, he's picking on Democratic cities." Well, he's not picking on Democratic cities. Why has he chosen these cities? Remember the bank robber, Willie Sutton? They asked him one time, "Why do you rob banks?" And he said, "Because that's where they keep the money." Well, why has the President Trump chosen these cities? Because that's where the problems are. That's where the leadership is ignoring the laws and not enforcing the laws. And that's where we have the problems. That's important. Now, the economy is getting better. It's getting better day by day. We see it. We see that the inflation that was at a 40-year high during the Biden-Harris administration, that now it's going down. Gas prices were at a 40-year high. They're going down now, and they went down, and now we got this conflict in Iran. This is a temporary bump that we're experiencing, but they'll level back off, and we'll be fine. But the president has delivered on his promises, and he's made it much more affordable, putting more money in people's pockets. That's the key.
Now, Congressman Carter, many people think, and probably arguably so, the impacts of Biden was so devastating to inflation, to businesses. What we're seeing this first year is certainly going to take a year or so for a president or new leadership to get in and change the pace. What we're seeing in these closed businesses is a couple of things. Changed environment of shopping. We've gone to more digital, to more retail stuff that's more online. We've seen definitely some of the highest inflation, some of the slowest growth we've ever seen in that last administration. So these impacts usually, and I try to tell people, what you're seeing today is not necessarily a result of today's leadership. We give leadership that credit. We give them that credit currently, but it's not of what we see today. So in asking this, we're seeing issues as we're experiencing through this broadcast, broadband, infrastructure. Those things are the challenges. We've been in and out with infrastructure, and I'm in the middle of a city. It's frustrating at times, but people don't realize the growth that we're seeing is at such a massive rate that we have to rely on strong federal leaders to bring money back to their states and their communities. Florida, when I served as commissioner, we brought $80 million back for our coastal. We brought it for broadband in the West, and we've got both. I almost arguably would say we have better broadband in the rural area than Atlanta has in its central area. But these are things that leaders don't focus on that impact the quality of life of the voters and the people that have lived here, the citizens of America that have lived here. We're more focused on that immigrant coming in illegally and supporting them than we are taking care of our own needs inside our country. I don't know any other country that allows that. I don't know any other country that allows you to go in and start pushing a different religion than what's their basis of their country. As a senator, how would you change some of this going on and occurring in our country?
Well, let me remind you and the viewers that I was a mayor in another life. I served as a mayor of a city that was the fastest growing city in the state of Georgia during the time I was mayor. I was mayor for 8 years. I understand infrastructure. I understand how important broadband is. I understand how important roads, bridges, water, all of those things, how important they are to the growth of a city and to the growth of a state. And that's why I focus on that, particularly on the committee that I serve on, the Energy and Commerce Committee. We have jurisdiction over all these things. And that's why it's important that we, particularly broadband, because right now we are trying to get the American Broadband Deployment Act, trying to get broadband more prevalent in our rural areas particularly. And keep in mind, in Georgia, and I suspect in Florida also, there's still some rural areas. There are still some areas that we have deserts and for broadband, and we need broadband in order to have economic development. We need it for education. We need it for healthcare, telehealth, all of those things. Broadband is extremely important. That's why when I go to the United States Congress, when I'm going to be in the Senate, I'm going to be working hard to make sure we have all that.
Congressman Carter, I love what you're saying there. I've listened to Ossoff. I've listened to Warnock talk in the state of Georgia, and they've never really addressed the issues that we're faced, or Atlantic Station is faced, supporting your local economy, supporting your businesses, growing it, growing the economy. I hear them talk a lot about giving more money away, taxing more people. That's the thing that baffles me. You've been in Congress for quite a while now. How do we give more money to illegal immigrants? How do we give all this and still take care of ourselves?
Well, we can't. That's what America First is all about. And that's why I support the president and his America First policies. I've been doing it. I did it during his first term. I've been doing it during the first year of his second term. I'll continue to do it in the Senate, supporting President Trump and his America First policies. Look, we live in the greatest country in the world. You hear about people trying to break into this country, but you don't hear about anybody trying to break out. And I still believe, like President Trump still believes, that our greatest times are ahead of us. That's why I'm asking people to vote for me for the United States Senate, so that I can go to the Senate and I can help President Trump deliver on his America First policies.
Congressman Carter, I love you being on the show today. I want to thank you for taking your time out of the campaign and out of Congress. You've worked hard up there with a lot of crucial, pivotal votes coming on the show today. And I want to remind our listeners, Georgia and Florida are border states. What happens in Georgia will trickle down to Florida. What happens in Florida will trickle to Georgia. We have a lot of people that live here that still carry their residency. We have a lot of people that come here to escape the northern push, the California push. We're asking you, and as Senator Rick Scott said, and many other people coming on here, support people like Congressman Carter, who's running for bigger seats. Show them that we don't want to lose any of our America. I was in California not too long ago. I was driving from Phoenix to California. I encourage any of you, drive that desert drive from I-10. Look at the beauty that we have in this country. I'm not ready to give up one of our 50 states to anyone.
Thank you, Jeff.
And Congressman Carter, we thank you for fighting and doing that. How can our listeners reach out and support you and help?
You can go to buddycarter.com, and there you'll find everything you need right there, buddycarter.com.
Congressman Carter, thank you and wish you all the success and luck with your run for Senate. And thank you for continuing to keep our country the greatest place to live, work, shop, and play.
Thank you, Joe.
And we want to remind our listeners, you can tune in anytime on YouTube and listen to any of our great shows. This show is by far one of our best ones we've had this year. Support Congressman Buddy Carter running for Senate of Georgia. It matters to all of the states in the country who holds those seats, because one vote could change the steering and destination of this whole country. Have a great weekend. And remember, let's live, work, shop, play in the greatest states in the greatest country in the world. Have a great weekend.